As I sat across the table from John, his mom, and the academic team, they all waited to hear my response to the team's question. Nurse Pryor, is this true? Have you ever heard or read anything about marijuana being used for ADHD? At that moment, I was thinking, how did it come down to me holding John's disciplinary fate in my hands? And totally unaware of my limited knowledge on the topic, I thought I knew more than I actually knew. Quite frankly, I thought if this were true, I would have known about it, because not only was I a holistic nurse, but I read peer-reviewed journals for fun. And I always tried to stay on top of the latest research. So I confidently stated, no, if cannabis was being used to treat ADHD, I'm sure I would have read about it, because I've read a lot of medical research. In just a matter of seconds, I had shut John down. I was his last hope at a table full of adults deciding his social and academic fate. The team trusted me and believed me. John trusted me and he was hopeful. And in that moment, I became an intricate part in the decision that John was a liar, a drug abuser, and totally incapable of being an advocate for his own health. But I think the biggest disservice that was done that day was that John left with no answers on how he could manage his ADHD without cannabis. He and his mom left with no other choice but to continue medications that made him feel, as he described it, bad. John graduated that same year. The following year, I came across a nursing article about the benefits of cannabis in the treatment of ADHD. Ain't that a kick in the head? I was crushed. It weighed heavily on me. I felt like I had let John down. I wanted to be able to confess to him that I was wrong. I wanted to be able to apologize to him. Hi, I'm Tamara Pryor. I am a cannabis nurse educator, and I've been a nurse for 25 years and a school health nurse for the past 18 years. And after 25 years, I've come to realize that I'm the nurse that possesses the gift of shaking things up wherever I work, for the good of the patient, of course. Still, I never thought that 13 years after throwing John under the bus, I'd be a cannabis patient, let alone a cannabis nurse, advocating for this plant, advocating for patients to have access to this plant, advocating for raw and uncut conversations about this plant, and advocating for our teams to know all about their ECS, also known as the endocannabinoid system, and how to upregulate it for better health. So, like many other students, John agreed to enter a substance abuse program to decrease his suspension days from 10 days to 5 days. And for safety reasons, of course, the school district has a very strict policy surrounding cannabis. Part of the policy states that students will be suspended and face expulsion if they even are emitting the odor, regardless of if they've consumed or not. And this is a policy that is across school districts across the country. And now, to be fair, the system is firm. It's very firm on paper, but it's become more lenient on a case-by-case basis over the past years. But still, the why is not being considered. According to a study that was published by the National Library of Medicine, the reasons teens listed for their use of cannabis included focus, attention, depression, anxiety, difficulty sleeping, and pain. I've heard just about all of these reasons from my students. Our teens' use of cannabis may not always start out as medical reasons, but for some, once they discover the improvement in how they feel, symptoms are alleviated, behavior improves, they typically continue for regular self-treatment. The concern with this approach is that not only is there not sufficient research regarding how cannabis use impacts the developing brain, it just so happens that it's also illegal for them to consume cannabis. And though we know that cannabis is a safe plant, according to many government organizations, there have been no reported cannabis-related deaths. As with any other medications, some people can experience side effects. So the question is, why aren't we teaching our teens about their ECS? The purpose of the ECS is to regulate all of the other systems in the body and to restore and maintain balance, to prevent and alleviate symptoms that many of our teens are using cannabis to manage. Our body creates THC and CBD-like chemicals to keep us healthy. We can actually make these chemicals on demand. Every year, we file our 9th grade students into a health class and teach them about every other body system. But we leave out the system that regulates all of the other systems. We should absolutely be teaching our teens about their ECS and how to support it so that it can take great care of them. I've spoken with many other students like John who have shared that they consume cannabis because their meds make them feel bad or because they don't want to take their medications. And some have even taken the time to look up the side effects of their medications and made the decision to discontinue their meds. And parents are reluctant to force their children to take their prescribed medications, but they also don't know what else to do to help them. So there's data from 2022 that showed that approximately 11% of children ages 12 to 17 consumed cannabis that year. That's at least 187,000 teens. We have an opportunity to educate and empower about how they can tap into what's already inside of them to support their health responsibly. Because let's be real, okay? Teens are not consuming quality cannabis. They are not thinking about, is this cannabis safe? Was it tested for heavy metals, toxins, pesticides, and mold? Who grew this cannabis? And how was it grown? Is it laced with a dangerous substance? No, they're just not thinking about those things. And since John, there have been many more students like him, like Ryan, who is a 9th grade student who was suspended due to emitting the odor of cannabis. He shared with me that he began consuming at age 12 to cope with grief after the death of his father. And Alan, who shared that cannabis helps him focus. And even though members of his academic team admitted that Alan had actually been doing better, his why was quickly dismissed. He was taken to the ER by his parent and diagnosed with cannabis use disorder. And that's just a very small example of students similar to John that I've encountered in the past 18 years. So, what if we try something new? What if we educated teens about their ECS? What it is and how it works? What if our kids were educated on how to care for their ECS? Excuse me. What if we empowered them to effectively manage their anxiety, depression, ADHD, insomnia, anger, and so on and so on? What if we taught our teens who clearly have decided to take matters into their own hands how to self-regulate and manage symptoms with lifestyle therapeutics? with breath work, mindfulness, movement, vibrant, delicious fruits and vegetables, herbs and spices. According to Dr. Uwe Blushing in his book, The Cannabis Health Index, each of these things can support the ECS in its job to restore and maintain balance in the body. If we educate our teens about their ECS and how to support it with lifestyle therapeutics to get the relief they're longing for, it's possible that we could reduce their cannabis use. And let me just quickly address what some may be thinking. Well, not all teens have these whys. They're just giving into peer pressure and want to experiment. I get that. But you know what? They're still going to benefit from this education and empowerment along the way throughout their lifetime. Just like John, their intuition is telling them what they need. We just have to help them get there. About a year or so after graduating, John returned to visit me. I was so happy to see that he was doing well, but I was also relieved. We chatted in the hall for a while. And then when there was finally a break in the conversation, I said, John, I need to apologize to you. He looked at me puzzled. I told him that I found out that he was right about there being health benefits in consuming cannabis to treat ADHD. I told him that I was sorry and that I felt like I had let him down. John looked at me and smiled and said, it's okay, Nurse Pryor. I shouldn't have been smoking anyway. Thank you for listening. I hope you've been empowered and inspired.